Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the Kabbalah of some of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. We're going to see, as we have seen in the past, how each letter, and tonight we're going to discuss some of them, each letter contains tremendous meaning and depth, and there's some very interesting and fascinating explanations that are connected and contained in each of the Hebrew letters. So it's not just the sounds that they make, but it's also the designs, the numerical value. Each letter has a number. We're going to get into all of this and learn some very interesting concepts, mostly learn from the Kabbalah on some of the letters. Just before we start, I think it'll be interesting because a lot of this is about Kabbalah and the Kabbalistic understanding of these letters. I think it'll be important and interesting to point out a bit of history that we are about to see again on the calendar. So just a historic date that we have coming up in a couple of days. So actually this Saturday, this Shabbat, is on the Jewish calendar. It's the 19th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev. Now, why is this an important day? Why is this a special day? Because back in 1798, a great rabbi, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, he was the founder of the Hasidic movement of Hasidism. He was freed from imprisonment in Tsarist Russia. Okay, so Rabbi Shneur Zalman is very famous, probably mostly for the Tanya that he wrote. The Tanya is the foundational work of Chabad and Jewish philosophy. It's a very powerful and very important book, and it's written as a guide for to understand and to overcome life struggles. So it's a book with tremendous depth, and it really reaches into the core of who we are as people and the core of what this world is and what this world is all about. So this is probably what Rabbi Shneur Zalman is most famous for. But back to the story at hand, the history, what happened on this day. He was freed from prison. Now, why was Rabbi Shneur Zalman in prison in the first place? So the charges against this rabbi was that his, this is back in Russia, that his teachings and his activities were against the Tsar of Russia. Now, of course, these were false accusations, but he was framed by his opponents, and he was charged for supporting the Turkish government, which was at war, I guess, some type of disagreement or war with Russia at the time. Now, one of the proofs for these charges was that Rabbi Shneur Zalman was sending money to support the Turkish government. Now, of course, this was not the case. Rabbi Shneur Zalman was sending money to poor families in Israel who were needy and needed the money. So he was sending charity to poor families in Israel. At that time, Israel was controlled by the Turks. So they kind of framed it in a way that Rabbi Shneur Zalman was supporting the enemy. While Rabbi Shneur Zalman was in prison, he had many interrogations, and he had to present and explain to the Tsar's ministers the fundamentals of Judaism and various ideas and topics in Jewish and Hasidic philosophy. Finally, after 53 days, Rabbi Shneur Zalman was released from prison, and all of the charges against him were cleared. Now, this was an unfortunate story, and really no reason why he was in prison to begin with. The charges were false, but Rabbi Shneur Zalman didn't see it that way. What he saw was that, of course, there was something happening, on a physical level, but he saw and he understood that it's much more than that. What he understood and what he told his followers and what he wrote was that what happened with the Russian government was really a representation of some type of objection that was going on up in heaven. And what he said was that perhaps, his teachings, which were based on Kabbalah, and he was in a way revealing the most intimate and deepest secrets of the Torah. So things that were not revealed for 3,000 years were all of a sudden becoming available to the masses. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman felt that what was happening, his imprisonment, was connected to a certain objection for the teachings that he was spreading, and it was all based on the Kabbalah, which was always the deepest secrets and always kept hidden, especially from the masses. There was only a few individuals in each generation that studied the Kabbalah, and here it was being made available to the masses. But when Rabbi Shneur Zalman was released from prison, he took this as a sign that he should move forward. So not only did he not stop teaching the Kabbalistic ideas, but now he started teaching it in a greater way. He started, spreading the message and the actual learning, the actual study of the Kabbalah. He started to do it in a more intellectual way, in a way that is even easier to understand, even more accessible to the average person. So this is why the 19th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev is an important day, because in a way this is the key to studying Kabbalah, especially today. So what we're going to talk about tonight is ideas from the Kabbalah. But if you open a book from the Kabbalah yourself, you'll probably understand, just 1% of what the Kabbalah is actually saying, if anything. But thanks to Rabbi Shneur Zalman and his teachings and the commentaries on his teachings, the Kabbalah becomes available to the average person, so we could study it. And in fact, so much of it is, if we apply it and if we think about it, so much of it is so helpful for daily life and life struggles and fascinating philosophy, Jewish philosophy. And this is thanks to Rabbi Shneur Zalman, and it's thanks to his release that was on the 19th of Kislev. So it's considered to be a very happy day and an important occasion. So most of what we're going to learn tonight is going to be thanks to Rabbi Shneur Zalman and the contribution that he made to the Jewish world and to Jewish study, specifically the study of Kabbalah. Okay, so that's the introduction. Now we can move forward with some letters of the Hebrew alphabet that we're going to discuss and get some insight and some explanation about. Unless someone has any comment or question, please let me know. Feel free to just say your questions or comments or write it in the chat box. Also, this is also on Facebook, so if anybody wants to write a comment on Facebook or a question, I will try to make sure I keep looking at that as well. Okay, I guess that means we're ready to start. Okay. Is it working on Facebook? It is. Okay. So the first letters that I would like to discuss, the first letters I'd like to focus on are two letters that look almost exactly the same, and I'll show you a picture of the letters in just a moment. So they look almost the same, but they sound completely different, and they represent very opposite ideas. Now, in order to understand the design of the letter and the meaning of the letter, we're going to first fast forward about 4 or 5 months to the holiday of Pesach, the holiday of Passover. Talk a little bit about Passover, Pesach, and then we could better appreciate the idea behind these letters. Now, in Pesach, there is a very interesting mitzvah, an interesting commandment and tradition, not to eat bread, but instead, for the duration of the holiday, to eat only matzah. Matzah is unleavened bread. So you basically take the dough, you don't give it a chance to rise. You bake it immediately. So it basically comes out looking almost like a cracker. So this is the matzah that we eat. Instead of the leavened bread, instead of the bread that rises and becomes soft and puffy, we have the unleavened bread. We have the matzah, which didn't have a chance to rise. And of course, many reasons for this mitzvah. We're not going to get into it tonight, but it's connected to the Exodus from Egypt, and it reminds us of the food that the Jewish people ate when they were leaving Egypt. Now, why am I mentioning this now? If it's just before the holiday of Hanukkah, why are we talking about Pesach? So the answer is that the Kabbalah explains the fundamental difference and the spiritual difference and the spiritual significance in these two letters. And these are the letters He and Chet. So the fifth letter and the eighth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, what is the connection between Pesach and these letters? So the Kabbalah says the following. The Kabbalah says that bread is compared to, well, before the letters, let's just talk about the difference between the bread and the matzah. The bread rises, the dough becomes soft and puffy. This represents arrogance. An arrogant person who is only concerned about his ego and is just haughty all of the time. And so arrogant people, they inflate themselves, very much like the dough that you make bread with. The dough becomes inflated, it rises. So bread represents arrogance. Matzah is exactly the opposite, because the matzah does not have a chance to rise. So matzah represents humility, represents a person who recognizes who they are, recognize their talents, they recognize their shortcomings. So they know what they're good at, they know where they need to improve, and they're honest with themselves. So this is the humble person. Humble doesn't mean that people step over you. Doesn't mean that you need to be a pushover. It means that you're honest with yourself. It means that you know your shortcomings. You recognize the mistakes that you make, and you also recognize your talents. And you remember that your talents and your success is not necessarily because you're the greatest person in the world. It's possible that you had certain opportunities and God gave you certain talents. So this is the humble person, recognizing the truth and being honest with themselves. Now, the holiday of Pesach, why do we only eat the matzah and we stay away from the bread? Because the holiday of Pesach is really about working on our character, refining ourselves, refining our personalities, and to develop better character traits. So this is what we focus on, at least on this is the spiritual side of Pesach, Passover. Besides for the Exodus, this is our personal Exodus, to be able to develop ourselves, develop our character. Now, I would like to take a look at these two Hebrew letters that we're going to talk about first, and then we're going to connect this to everything that we just shared. So here you can see, if it comes up on the screen, hopefully. Let's see if it's working. Okay, here we go. So here you can see the word for bread, or leavened bread. So this is the three letters, that's the chet, the mem, and the tzadik. This is the leavened bread you could see right there in English. Next, we have the matzah. The matzah is the cracker. That is the unleavened bread. Now, by looking at these letters, could you point out which letters do they have in common, and where are they different? Anybody want to show us?
Yeah, the last letter for the bread is different than the first for matzah. I mean, there are only two uncommon.
Okay, so I only see one. You said two are common, right?
No, like two uncommon. They share like the last for bread and the first for matzah.
I see only one that's uncommon, and I colored them so you can see that a little better. So here we have the two. Both of them have the mem, so that's the same. Both of them have the tzaddik, so that's also the same. The only difference between them is
the last and the first.
The last and the first, exactly. So the bread, the leavened one, has a ches, and the unleavened one has a hey. Okay, so this is the whole difference between these two words that are completely different and represent, complete opposites. They have almost the same letters. There's only one letter that's different, and even these two letters look almost the same. Now let's zoom into these two letters and focus just on them. So these are the letters that are different. We have the ches and the hey. And if you notice, they're almost exactly the same, except that the wall on the left side, on the ches, it's complete. It goes all the way to the top. It goes all the way to the roof. And on the hey, it's broken. So there's the separation and the space between the leg and the top of the letter and the roof. So what is this all about? So they both have the open space and the opening at the bottom. So they both have the open bottom. What does that represent? So this represents the evil inclination. You can call it the animal soul, the animal part of us, or the evil inclination. The evil inclination is always, this is the voice that's pushing you to do something that's perhaps a sin, or to hurt someone's feelings, or to do something not nice. Whatever it might be, anything that's negative is coming from the evil inclination. It's this voice that's pushing you to do something not good. So the evil inclination is always there, and it's always waiting at the door, and it's waiting for an opportunity to influence your behavior and push you to do something not so good. It's always alert. It's always present. And you can't miss them. It's actually the most natural thing to follow this voice, because this is the voice that's telling you to be selfish. This is the voice that's telling you to focus on yourself and just do what's comfortable for you, and not necessarily pay attention to what's good for others, and to go out of your way for others. And this is the natural way, right? It takes maturity, it takes growth, personal growth, and character growth, and personality growth to become more selfless and to be more interested in others and to go out of your way and put yourself on the side for others. So the natural thing is to follow the evil inclination and to be selfish. Now, we all have shortcomings and we all have mistakes. The question is only, how do we deal with these mistakes? How do we deal with the shortcomings that we have? So this is the open bottom. This is the open bottom of the ches and of the hay. This represents how the easiest is just to fall down, right? So to follow the evil inclination, just to be selfish, just to care about yourself, to go down a bad path, or to be lazy, not productive, just to slide and to fall down, right? So this is represented by the open bottom of the ches and the hay. Now, everyone has the open bottom. We all do things that are wrong from time to time. We all make mistakes. We all have shortcomings. So we all have this open bottom. That's why both the ches and the hay have the open bottom. Now, the difference between people and the choice that we could make is how we deal with these mistakes and how we deal with these shortcomings. Now, an arrogant person will not acknowledge the mistake, right? So they're always thinking about how great they are. They're completely consumed with themselves and their own greatness. They're always showing how they're right and they're never wrong. So such a person will never be able to acknowledge their mistakes, let alone try to fix it. They're too caught up in their own ego. They're too caught up in always being right, not able to acknowledge a shortcoming, a mistake. Now, someone who is humble, on the other hand, could acknowledge a mistake and could acknowledge a wrong. Now, once that happens, once you're able to acknowledge something that happened, then you could work to improve it. You could try to work on yourself to make sure the next time you don't make the same mistake. And this is exactly the difference between the ches and the hay. This is the difference between the leavened bread and the unleavened bread, the difference between the bread and the matzah. The person who is arrogant, we have it here on the right side, and the person who is humble, we have it here on the left side. The mistake is at the bottom. Everyone has these shortcomings, everyone has the evil inclination, and for everyone it's the natural way just to fall into just to fall into this selfish mode and selfish mindset. Now, the person on the right side of the screen, we have the haughty and arrogant person. He has no way out because he cannot acknowledge his mistakes and his wrongdoing. So he only has one way to go. He's going to fall down. He's going to fall down. There's nothing he could do, because even when the arrogant person is forced to acknowledge their mistake, they'll always come up with an excuse to explain why it's okay and why it's fine that they did it. So the arrogant person is never going to be able to escape this downfall and becoming a person with worse behavior. Their behavior is only going to get worse because there's nowhere to go. It's only down. That's the only place that's open. Now, on the other hand, we have on the left side, we have the matzah, the unleavened bread. The person, this represents the person who is humble. So they also make mistakes and they also fall, but there's a way out. As soon as they acknowledge, as soon as they recognize, and they could recognize that they made a mistake, now they could begin to work on themselves. They could begin to fix the mistake so that it doesn't happen again. And this is represented by the small escape route at the top. Going up, climbing higher represents becoming a better person, fixing mistakes. So we'll always have an evil inclination. It's always going to be completely natural to be more selfish and to do things that are that might be no good, or to say something not nice. Things happen, and this is our nature. We're human beings. We're not perfect, but the humble person, if you're able to be humble, if you're able to acknowledge what needs to be worked on, the mistakes or wrongdoing whatever happened, there's always a way out. If you're willing to recognize the shortcomings, and there's always a way out at the top, there's always an escape route. I'd like to give a short little example of a story from the Talmud. Very interesting story that happened with Rabbi Akiva. I think we mentioned Rabbi Akiva was very great sage. We talked about him probably in some earlier discussions. This story happened with Rabbi Akiva, and it's recorded by the Talmud. And the story goes like this, very short story. I'll just read it from the text. I'm gonna have it in front of me. The wicked Turnus Rufus, I don't know exactly who that is, I don't remember. He asked Rabbi Akiva, if your God loves the poor, for what reason does he not support them himself? Good question. Rabbi Akiva answered, he, referring to God, he commands us to act as his agents in sustaining the poor, so that through them we'll be credited with the performance of mitzvahs and therefore be saved from bad judgment. So Rabbi Akiva's saying is that it's our job. God is giving us the responsibility and the obligation to support people who are needy. So it's not that God doesn't care about them. God does, but he wants the world, and he wants people to learn how to give and learn how to share and be kind to one another. And like this, we become better people. We have the opportunity to choose to get credit for what we did. And this is why the world is set up this way. Some people are rich, some people are poor, and some people are in the middle. Now, imagine someone is walking down the street and they see a poor fellow. So an arrogant person could easily might say to themselves, look, this person doesn't have money. If he was truly deserving, God would give him money. So this is what an arrogant person might think. So they're so caught up with their own selves that they think to themselves that they're the only ones who are deserving. And if someone doesn't have, it's because they're not as great as they are. So that's an arrogant person. A humble person will walk down the street and see the same person, but won't think that they are greater than the other person. They might just realize that it's their responsibility to help the poor, to help the needy, and to support them. So this is the difference between someone who's just a little story from the Talmud. We see the difference between someone who is arrogant and someone who's humble. And this is the idea. This is the significance of the letters Ches and Hey. The Ches represents the leavened bread that is puffy. The Ches represents the arrogant person. The arrogant person only has one way. It's a free fall all the way down, because he'll never acknowledge his mistakes, let alone fix it. And even if he does acknowledge the mistake, he'll keep making excuses why it was okay. On the other hand, we have the Hey, which has a little opening at the top. So even though a person does fall, because we are all human, none of us are perfect, we all make mistakes, but as soon as we're ready to recognize the mistake, we have a way out. We can climb up, we can climb out, escape this trap of no good, and work to change that and to better ourselves and better our character. Okay, so that is the story of the Ches and the Hey. Let me know if you have any comments or questions that we could discuss. And then after this, we have a few more letters that we're going to do.
I could mention one thing.
Please.
Can you show the letters again?
Sure. Let me share the screen. There you go.
Say the letters again.
The chet and the hey.
Het is the one on the right, and
Correct.
Hamas is the one on the left.
The hey is on the left.
Hey.
And the chet is on the right. Correct.
Okay. So I remember somebody telling me that the word humble, to mean the derivative of this word, it means broken to the yoke of God. So we see, as you mentioned, this is a broken letter to the yoke of God. You said it's not strong, it's not a weak person, it's a strong person. Of course, if we're centered upon God, then even if we're humble, I mean, we're united with God, and I mean before God, that is, and so that will give us the strength that we need to continue.
Yeah.
Also, you notice on the left side is pointing up. So I would say that the person who's taken the humble position, or if that represents a person, then the point is it's on the left side, not the right side, because the left side is pointing up to heaven.
Okay.
So that also is the right place, I think, for the small part. And of course, as you mentioned, it's a humble position. So I mean, he's open, and so he has. I mean, there's room to grow. There's room to grow.
Oh.
So that's
very good.
Looks just fine. Like the right letter for the right word.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other comments, questions? Please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll move right along. Okay. So next we have one of the names of God. Okay. So we're talking about the name of God, or one of the names of God, which is made up of 4 letters. And we're going to look at these 4 letters. And this is only one of God's names. God has many names, and we're going to look at this one tonight. Now, you might be wondering, why does God have multiple names? So that's a great question. And the truth is that in essence, God doesn't have any names. And that's because God is unlimited. God is infinite. And we cannot describe him with any name or any title, because any title is going to limit God to that description and to that, to that title. So in fact, God, at least in essence, doesn't have or shouldn't have any names, and he doesn't. In essence, there are no names that could actually describe God, because God is infinite. But the Medrash says something very interesting. The Medrash says that God says the following: "You want to know my name?" And this is a quote. "You want to know my name? I'm called according to my actions." That's what the Medrash says. So this means that basically God will do certain things, and then we could give him a name or give him a title according to what he has done, right? So this is a concept in the Kabbalah. So for example, God will create the world, so we could call him creator. God will have mercy on people, so we could call him the merciful one. Or God will judge people, so we could call him a judge, right? So each of these names express one aspect of God. So one of these titles, take creator, for example, to call God creator, that's not that doesn't express who God really is, because God is so infinite that he's not defined by the world. He's not defined by having mercy. He's not defined by judging, right? So there's no one name that could define God, because God is a whole host of things. It's unlimited. God's power and God's ability is unlimited, says the Kabbalah. And this is in a way similar to to give an example. We could see the same things in our own lives and in our own relationships. So So what are you called? You have a name, but you actually have many titles. You could be a mother, you could be a sister, you could be a daughter, you could be a wife, you could be a friend, right? So these are every person could have many titles, many titles. One of these titles are not going to express and are not going to define your whole life. Yes, you're a daughter of your parents, but that doesn't define who you are. You're also a married person. You also have a circle of friends. You also have siblings, right? So there are many relationships that you have. One title only represents and only expresses one. So the same thing is with God. God has. Why does God have many names? Because we cannot give him one name, because one name is like calling you a father or calling you a brother. That's not all you are. You're much more than that. You have many other parts, many other aspects of your life. So the same thing is with God. That's why God has many names. And this is why the Medrash says, and the Kabbalah explains, that we could call God by his actions. So basically, God chooses to express himself in certain ways, and he doesn't have to. God could could express himself in any way that he wishes, but he'll choose a way to express himself, and then we could give him a name, a title, and a description according to that action, according to that expression that he makes. So I'd like to talk about a fundamental subject in Kabbalah, which is basically a structure of character traits, which is how God chooses to express himself and to relate with people and to relate with the world and to relate with everything that we know. This is also the way human beings are structured. Okay, so God created people in a similar way to this structure that he chose to express himself through. So what do I mean by that? So if you look into the Torah, if you look into the first book of the Bible, you look into Genesis, into Bereshit, to the story of the first human being. How is the first human being created? So I'm going to read you the quote, very short quote. I have it in front of me. And it says like this: "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Okay, this is just part of the verse, but that is the most important for this discussion. So first of all, who is God speaking with? He was speaking to the angels, and he tells the angels, let's create man. Why did God say, this is a side note, of why did God say, let us, as if he's not doing it by himself? He was being humble. So God said that we're going to create a person, we're going to create a human being similar to our image. Okay, so what is this image that God is talking about, and what does this mean? How does it work? What are the details? So I'd like to explore this topic in Kabbalah, very famous and fundamental and important topic. And it really is the way, it's a structure of character traits, the way God expresses himself and relates to us and everything that we know. Now we're going to see how this entire system, if you will, the system of and the structure of character traits is hinted to in the 4 letters of God's name. Okay, so tonight's discussion is all about letters and what they represent and the significance and the meaning. And so we're going to see how this Kabbalistic idea and this structure, which the Kabbalah called Sefirot, the Hebrew word is Sefirot, we're going to see how this is hinted to in the 4 letters of God's name. Okay, So let's put this up on the screen so we know what we're talking about, and get started. Let's see how this works. I think it takes a few seconds until I could change this slide. Okay, still from before. Okay, so here we have a 4-letter name of God. We have these 4 Hebrew letters. We have the Yud, we have the Hey, we have a Vav, and we have a second Hey. So this is a very famous name of God. It's usually translated as Lord, but of course it contains so much in it, and we could probably have many classes just talking about the name of God. But tonight we're going to talk about how this name of God hints to the structure of the Sefirot, of the character traits, how God expresses himself, and also how we are the makeup of ourselves, of our characters and our souls. Okay, so we'll start like this. When you have an idea, okay, so it could be any idea. You have an idea that pops into your head, an intellectual idea. So what happens? What is the first step? How does it work? So the first thing that happens is you have this flash of the idea. And what pops into your head at the first second, at the first moment of this idea coming to your head, is the very essence and the very core of the idea. So it doesn't have any details attached to it. The idea does not have any framework connected to it. It's a very raw idea. It's just the core. It's just a raw point. It's just a raw idea, and it's so elusive that if somebody distracts you, you could lose the idea, and you could forget the idea. You need to concentrate in order to hold on to the idea so that you can bring it to the next step. So this is the first step of when you have an idea. Now this is called in the Kabbalah, this is called Chachma. That's the Hebrew word, and that means God's wisdom. God's wisdom. So it's the part of the wisdom which is the raw point, just the raw idea, the core of it, and the essence of it. It just pops into your head like a flash of lightning, just out of the blue. It just comes to you. Now this is represented in the first letter of God's name. This is the letter Yud, and you could also see this in the design of the letter. Compared to all of the other letters, it's a very tiny letter. It's almost like this little dot compared to the other letters. And this is because it represents this part of the core of the intellectual idea, the core of the wisdom, of God's wisdom. How at least at this stage and at this first moment, this first second of it coming into your head, it's just this point, it's just this single tiny point that is still not developed. So this is the Yud, it's the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The next stage of developing the idea is the development stage. It's the stage where the idea is expanded in terms of the details of the idea, what it consists of, how it works. So it's really expanding the idea to so that it makes sense, so that there's a full picture. And so it's a full-fledged idea. This is called Bina in the Kabbalah. It's called Bina. Bina means understanding. So from this tiny piece of wisdom, from just the core, now this is something that you could understand. It's something that could make sense. It's something that you could explain to another person. It's something that It's something that is a full picture. It's a full idea. There's a plan. There's a context. There's how it works, the details. All of that. So it's the developing of the idea. It's the developing the idea, which is the second stage, and this is represented in the second letter of God's name, the He. Now, if you think about the design of the letter, it's very interesting because you could see how the corner kind of includes the Yud, it kind of includes that first dot, but it's expanded to the left and to the bottom, to the lower part of the page. So this really expresses, and this really hints to this development stage and this second stage of the idea, of the intellectual idea. So the dot needs to be expanded both in the breadth and in the depth. So that's why we see it expanding in more than one direction. So that's because it's becoming a full picture. The idea is becoming a very full idea with details and a whole plan that's connected to it. Now, so this is the intellectual part of the structure of character traits. So the intellect, the first step is always intellect. It starts with the brain. And so these are the two steps. We have this flash that pops into your head, the first stage, and then the second stage of developing the idea. Just to give a quick example, so this becomes more down to earth and easier to understand. Let's talk about the iPhone for a second, and Steve Jobs, who created and invented the iPhone. So I can't tell you for sure that this is how it happened, but for the purpose of this example, let's make believe this is how it happened. So one day the idea pops into Steve Jobs' mind that there should be some type of phone which is all-encompassing. So it's going to be an all-encompassing internet communicator, music player, camera, everything in one. And somehow this phone is going to have a giant screen. The whole thing is going to be a screen. So it's going to be huge, and you'll be able to see everything in big and in detail. It's going to be a very beautiful phone, but it's a very raw idea at this point. It's just the essence, and it's just the core of the idea, because there's still no plan. There's still no understanding of how such a thing is possible, and how such a thing could be done. There's no details. There's no framework. It doesn't make sense yet. It doesn't make sense yet, because how are we going to get rid of the keyboard? How can you use a phone without the keyboard? It's impossible. How could the phone contain so much? So these are questions, and the questions are there because the idea is not yet developed. But then comes the second stage, and the second stage is when the idea formulates into a full picture and a proper understanding with details and a proper plan, and then you start to realize and you start to understand that there could be an on-screen keyboard, and the keyboard could disappear when it's not needed, and it can be replaced with something else, with a camera, with music, whatever it might be. The keys are not always needed, because you could use your finger as the mouse. So at the core of the idea, it still didn't make sense how it was possible. How could it work? How could we get rid of the screen? How are you going to press things? But slowly the idea develops in the second stage, and these questions are answered and these solutions are found. But it's really all contained in the original dot. It's really all contained in this first flash, and it only needs to be expanded and thought through to unravel it. Okay, so this is the intellectual part of this character and the character traits that the Kabbalah talks about, that God uses to express himself. The next step is the emotions. So with the emotions, we have the letter Vav. In general, there are 6 emotions. Now, emotions are very important because without the emotions, there's no way that the idea could be relevant to you. Without emotions, there's no way that you could feel it in a personal way. Without emotions, this idea is just abstract, and you don't care about it. And the same is with sharing it with a friend. You will not convey this idea to a student or to a friend if there are no emotions. You need emotions in order to have some feeling for it, in order to have some interest to share it with a friend or with a student. So, of course, emotions are very important in making anything relevant and making anything personal. Now, in general, there are 6 emotions, and these emotions are hinted to in the letter Vav. Now, Vav, the numeric, we talked last time how every letter has a numerical value, and the numerical value of Vav is the number 6. And of course, there are 6 emotions. 6 emotions. Besides for the numerical value, we also have the design of the letter. The design of the letter is this line and this path going downwards, and this represents how the idea is flowing down from the brain down to the heart. And there's a lot to talk about, and the Kabbalah has a tremendous amount of information, very fascinating stuff about the emotions. We don't have the time for it today. We should save this for another day, another separate discussion. But let's just say that that there are in general 6 emotions. We'll have to expand upon that another time, but there are 6 in general, and the idea is that the emotions are very important to making it relevant and making it personal to yourself and to others. So the Vav is really the connection between the brain and the heart. It's really what makes the idea go from something abstract to something practical, because now it's something that you could care about. Now it's something that could be relevant, something that could be used, and something that could have a certain benefit. And this leads us to the next letter, which is the Hey. And Hey is, we already had this letter before, and before we talked how the Hey represents expanding an idea, expanding the dot, expanding a raw point, a raw idea, and developing it into something full, something that has detail, something that has a plan, something that is usable, something that makes sense. And we'll say exactly the same thing with this Hey, because this Hey is also doing the same thing. Why is it doing the same thing? Because the Hey represents speech. Okay, so once you have the idea, once you have the intellectual side of things, and you have the emotion, so it's something that's relevant to you, and it's something that you care about, and it's something that you're connected with, now you are interested to share it with others. And this is what the Hey represents. The Hey represents speech. Why does it represent speech? Because it's the just like the design of the letter, it's the expansion of the idea. But this time, the expansion is not in your own brain. It is sharing it with someone else. So now this is in the student's brain or in your friend's mind. They could now appreciate this knowledge. They're getting this idea as a full picture of a ready idea, fully expanded, something that makes sense, something that could be comprehended, something that is relatable, something that is could be used and something that you can benefit from. So this is the four letters of God's name. So quickly, the Yud is the original idea, just that flash that pops into your head in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day. Then is the next stage, developing the idea in the width and in the breadth and the depth. So it has all of the details. Then comes the Vav, bringing it down to the emotions, connecting the mind and the heart, and finally speech, sharing it with someone else. And when you share it with a student or with a friend, now they have the opportunity to receive this idea in its full glory with all of the details, all of the information that's attached to this idea that's included in this original thought and this original flash that popped into your head just a short time before. Okay, so now, as we said before, this is how God chooses to express himself in, with us, with the world. And this is also how human beings are created. We also have the system of the intellect and the emotions, and then the speech. There actually is more to it than we discussed today. There's more to it. There are also parts to these character traits that are more subtle, that are more connected to the subconscious. So there's really much more here, and we could really spend a lot more time talking about this. But this is definitely the concept, at least in a nutshell. This is the concept that we have this. We have the intellect, we have the emotions, and then we have the speech, and which later leads to action. So this people also have the same structure. So you could have an idea in a similar way, and then the idea is developed, then it comes into your heart, turns into something. You have certain emotions for it, you have certain feelings for it, you can share with other people. So this is how people are also. Now, of course, we cannot compare our wisdom to God's wisdom. God's wisdom is infinite. We cannot compare, our emotions to God's emotions, God's kindness to our kindness. There's no comparison there. But essentially, the structure is comparable, and the structure is the same. And that's what is meant when God said, "Let us create a human being in our image." So it's the same structure that God chose for himself, that he should express himself through, that we are also created with. And this is how we communicate, this is how we operate, and this is really our makeup. So of course, this is in a way a short version, a nutshell of all of this, but we see how much is contained. This is all hinted to in God's name, because this name is describing how God expresses himself to us. He expresses himself to us through this system. So what could we take from this? What could we learn from this? Perhaps we could say that we could see from here the importance of carrying something over from the intellect into the emotions, carrying something over from the brain into the heart. So it could be wonderful to study things in general. It could be wonderful to study the Torah, which is God's wisdom. And in fact, it is a very enjoyable study and very intellectually stimulating study. And it's a wonderful, enjoyable learning experience. But perhaps the most important thing is to bring it down into the emotions. That this is what gives us a certain feeling for the ideas that we learn about, for the things that we come across, for the Torah that we learn. So this is how we can get a feeling for whatever idea it might be. And if it's the Torah, if it's God's wisdom, then this is how we could have more of a feeling to mitzvahs and to God and to doing good and becoming better. And ultimately, this could lead, if something comes down into the emotions, if something comes into the heart, and it's something that we relate to, and it's something that becomes personal, something that is relevant to us, then we could share with others, and we can act upon it, and hopefully, if it's a good idea, if the concept is a good one, if the intellectual idea is a positive one, then this creates positive action and sharing positive ideas, and making a positive impact in the world. So just a very quick summary in 2 sentences. What we covered today are some interesting letters of the Hebrew alphabet. First, we talked about the He and the Ches, and we discovered how the difference between the He and the Ches is the humble person versus the arrogant person. The humble person has a little space at the top where he could break through and free himself from mistakes, from wrongdoing, from shortcomings. And this is the only way that a human being could grow, by acknowledging shortcomings, by acknowledging mistakes, and hopefully taking that as a lesson to work on ourselves and to become, the best version of ourselves and the best we could become. We also discovered, at least in a nutshell, God's name, what it expresses, the hints that it contains, which is the way God relates to the world and this system, the structure of character traits, which is also the way we are created. And hopefully positive ideas turn into feelings, and then turn into sharing it with others, bring it into positive action, positive change, and good things.